Good afternoon and welcome everybody to the session on data and health. It's quite crowded, it's very good. My name is Marco Marcella. I'm head of unit in DG Connect, in the unit eHealth, Wellbeing and Aging. And I have the privilege today to, let's say, go through the issues of data for health with our six panelists. It's an assembly of let's say, industrial representatives, researchers, government, research projects. And what we will be doing, we will discuss the challenges and the opportunities that are attached to health data. A few months ago, in this co-creation process together with our colleagues in DG Santé and DG Research, the Commission put forward a strategy on the digitizations of health and care. Three pillars. One is access to data. Second one, creating new data, the genomic declarations. Then the third one, putting this data into use. So in a number of actions, data is at the core, is the backbone of the groundbreaking, if you want, technological evolutions, which will be part of Horizon Europe. So we will be discussing today a number of issues. For logistical reasons, we have confined to 5 minutes interventions for each of our panelists, and then at the end we will have the possibilities to interact with you. So, who our panelists are? I will start with Karim Lekadir, who is a senior researcher and a data scientist at the BCN and MedTech Center at the University of Pompeu Fabra, and he will take us through some interesting 6 pioneering projects that eventually are working on this concept of phase data. He will tell us more about that. Then, if I continue in that direction, we have Lubna Burfa, who is founder and CEO of Okra Technologies. She is very knowledgeable on AI and in analytics for health and care as well, to the point that she's member of the high-level group on artificial intelligence that the Commission has established some months ago. And she will tell about her views on the economy of data and on the data-driven society. So what effects would that be for the AI part of our equations? Then, if I continue, we have Professor Edwin Morlin Fletcher, who is founder and CEO of Linkeus. He will talk about 2 projects, or well, a number of projects, but mainly he will focus on the, if you want, the security and privacy part of the equation, and how technological solutions can help us in dealing with trust and security in dealing with sensitive health data. Then we have Dr. Claire Lamotte, who is the French program lead for the collaboration on cancer data in Europe. And this is a multi-stakeholder collaborations on oncology data, so she will tell us how that setup actually works and what the challenges are and the benefits are. Then we get into the government, if I may say so. So Nick Schneider, who is a health policy maker at the German Federal Ministry of Health, and he will talk about that perspective. So the Germans, in that sense, the German Ministry of Health perspective and the role of healthcare and the initiative that you are planning for the presidency, for instance, that is upcoming. And last but not least, our friend Ivo Gut, who is director of the National Center for the Genomic Analysis in Barcelona, and he will also touch about the 1 million genome declarations initiative that the Commission is facilitating as a member states initiative. So I would like to ask then first the first speaker to tell more about the projects. Nick, so Karim, the floor is yours. And you have
I need the slides somewhere.
Do we have the slides up and running? Yeah, they will come. Voila.
Yeah. Okay, I can see them. Okay, so what I'm going to do is present a number of projects that were co-funded by the European Commission, but also by the Canadian Institute for Health Research, as part of a program called International Flagship Collaboration with Canada for human data storage, integration, and sharing to enable personalized medicine approaches. So I'm going to go through the 6 projects, and you will see that they're focusing on different application domain, different data types, but they have a lot in common. So the first one is called You Can Share, and it's focusing more on medical imaging and omics data. The second one is You Can, and it's focusing on cancer genomic data. Third one is You Can Connect, and it's focusing on exposome data, environmental data, lifestyle data, but also microbiome and epigenomic data. The Seneca project is focusing on population scale biomolecular data, recorded on epidemiology data, omics from the clinical domain, and then iReceptor that is even more specific, focusing on antibody and T-cell receptor sequencing data. So all these projects, although they are different on the data types, they have a lot of common themes that they are addressing, and they are all related to something called FAIR, or verification of data. So in FAIR, the F means making the data findable, the A is accessible, the I is interoperable, and the R is reusable. So I'm going to go through them one by one. So to make the data findable, we need to find solution for federated data discovery. So typically these are software solution and data or metadata models to allow users to search for the data, because we have now a lot of data and we need to find the data that is relevant for specific clinical questions. And there are a number of solutions we're developing. The second part is to make the data accessible and to allow users to send access applications and to facilitate these interactions with data providers. And again, there are a number of solutions. So Edwin will present something in more detail later on related to the use of blockchain for that. But typically, this is a decentralized system that enables secure, automated control of data access. So you'll get more details on that later. So the third part is how to make the data interoperable. So we need to do harmonization, data harmonization. And because typically the variables are stored differently in different databases across different sites. This is an example with age, for example. So again, here we need to find different solutions, so specifically harmonization algorithm and software to allow this to be carried out as intuitively as possible. So for example, there is a Canadian solution that is quite advanced that we're trying to extend and use in these projects. It's called Opal. The last bit is about then the reusability of the data. So to do data analysis, which is really the ultimate goal, to do personalized medicine research. So this is an example of the data as it is in the You Can Share project. So these are 35 databases located in different places. So we need to do federated data analysis. So here again, we're developing some solutions to allow this. I would like now to talk about other things that are important. First one is related to ethics and legal issues that are very important here. So with the introduction of GDPR, all these projects are working on identifying commonalities, mismatches, and gaps between the different regulations. And this is based on some working groups. So for example, the Global Alliance for Genomic Cell Health, they're putting together some frameworks, standards, codes of practice, and even some technologies to allow this to be done. So there's a lot of work on this in this project. I would like to mention that all these projects, they do not start from zero, but they're actually reusing a lot of existing infrastructures and expertise that was developed in Europe over the years. So these are, for example, infrastructures such as Elixir, the European Genome Phenome Archive, PBMRI, Eurobioimaging. So one thing we were trying to do is to make all these different infrastructures which are specialized in specific types of data talk to each other and be able to link them and basically enable integrated access to heterogeneous data. So this is important for precision medicine research. Finally, I would like to say that all this at the end is to do personalized medicine research and to impact health one way or another. So this project, at the end, they have specific use cases, clinical questions that they're trying to address, even though they're working on all sorts of technologies and issues that are trying to address. So, for example, in this 6th project, You Can Share is focused on prediction of cardiovascular events. You can count on finding biomarkers that are predictive of therapeutic response. You can connect working on risk factor for obesity, cardiovascular, metabolic, and immune disease. Sinica is working on diagnostic and care planning in clinical practice, recorded on Zika virus, and iReceptor on immunotherapy. So I'm going to stop by just mentioning that all these projects trying to leverage European, but also expertise from outside Europe where possible, in this case Canada. There are other things that we're trying to work on, open science. We're talking to researchers to see how we can improve the sharing of data. We're trying to integrate AI. This was not an essential theme, but we're trying to do this, and it will be done more and more in the future, I imagine. And we're trying to integrate other type of data, like real-world data that come from clinical practice, but also things like wearable and sensor data. So this is it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Karim. While I invite Edwin to join us for the prosecution, or do we want to follow in that line? That's very well. So no, good. Then we go for Lubna. I think that this it's a good prosecution of the first two elements that are emerging from this 5 minutes
I hope
pitch.
the slides follow the same pattern.
Well, they will.
They will? Okay.
In that sense, I think I note down two elements which are very important. First one, it's about the governance of health data. And the second one, it is about it's attached to the data representation issue, but it's about the governance of health data. Now, this all together, because eventually somebody needs to use this data. So it would be very nice to get the views from Lubna on how do you see that futures, and especially in analyzing the data through AI. Lubna.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I don't see the slides moving, I assume. Okay, so I'll just start. I'm Lubna Bouarfa, so I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Okra Technologies. It's an artificial intelligence company, so I'll go back, that use artificial intelligence to drive the right drug to the right patients. So we partner with life science companies, and I will come back to that, why, the reason behind that. So we know that pharma is moving beyond the pill, and we want to drive the right drugs to the right patients. So our philosophy at Okra is that when we use a technology like artificial intelligence, it's not going to be intelligent if it doesn't provide actionability for the user, whether it's a life science executive, whether it's a healthcare provider, whether it's a regulator. So we need to provide that actionability, as well as we need to provide the explainability, the reasons behind the AI system's output. And that's two key components for any AI system. Moving to the vision, what we do, and why life science. Being a machine learning scientist by education and turned an entrepreneur, I worked in my academic career with hospitals, using AI to drive effectiveness and efficiency at hospitals. So the largest hospital I worked with was in Vanderbilt Hospital in the US, huge, a lot of patients per year, approaching or more than 1 million. But still, if you look to the scale, in terms of scale, we're still talking about thousands, if we are in 1 million. But if we look from another dimension, and we look to the drugs, the pills, if we look to the US, 70% of the US citizens are on prescriptive drugs. If we look in Europe and England, half of the adults are on prescriptive drugs. So if we use artificial technologies as a technology, using all the data that we have, open data to proprietary data, to drive the right drug to the right patients, we will achieve much, much bigger scale. So just to give you an example, as a small company, the first project we worked with around the drug, so interfacing the communication between life science and the healthcare provider, was for a drug that has an outreach for 1.2 million patients just in the UK. And now that software is scaled to make sure that people, for example, that are living in urban areas versus rural areas still get the same chances to get novel treatments. So our vision at Okra is, if we use AI to springboard to precision medicine, to empower the ecosystem, and to use AI to drive the communication and reduce the waste, to improve effectiveness as well as efficacy, as an interaction between different stakeholders, is key to move to our goal. So And that, I think, it's the vision also for Europe. We need to aim for how can we develop innovation in Europe that addresses the scale, moving to nearly 8 billion population on Earth. How can we do that? It's great to deep dive into innovative projects that solve problem A, but we should not forget about the bigger picture, the scale. So I'm going to share with you 3 products that addresses the scale from a small AI company that has a big ambition in Europe. So the first product is about optimizing clinical trials. So there was a paper published in the BMJ Journal 2014. The title is Clinical Trials, What a Waste. Unregistered, unfinished, unpublished, unreachable, or simply irrelevant. So how we can use AI to drive and to reduce the waste there and drive effectiveness. So for example, in a small R&D project that we started at a small company with big ambition, we combined all the open data sources coming from clinical trials, from the European Repository of Clinical Trials, to PubMed, all of that to score the type of questions that are most likely to success. But not only that, also to score which sites are most likely to result in clinical trials. And now we combine that with internal data to our clients to help them address clinical trials in an efficient way. Another product is about optimizing prescription at the point of care. So as we know, many of the new drugs that are coming today, they work on a very targeted group of patients. So we need to keep educating our healthcare providers to what patients they need to prescribe that drug. And that's a software that uses AI to drive the education part of healthcare providers. So we can make sure that in a rural area, somewhere in Europe, or another place in the world, that doctors still prescribe that drug for patients that need it. And last but not least, a product about smart pricing. We know about the rise costs in healthcare. We know that we need to innovate our price and reimbursement. And we know that many chronic diseases, it's not about efficacy anymore. It is about compliance. It's about behavioral change. So how can we use and package our pricing in a way that addresses that? We help also life science companies to address that area and to come up with creative pricing solutions. So as an entrepreneur in this space, for me, what is really important, what we need to do in Europe to move the needle ahead, I think it's to move to more agile and sandboxes, to create a testing environments where we can test very quickly in a speed, and I'm not talking about months, I'm talking about weeks, how feasible a solution is within not just a single environment, but a multiple environments, and then scale it. So baby steps, test, and then move on. And I think that's the key message as an entrepreneur in this space I want to share with this audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Lubna. Thank you, Lubna. Lubna belongs to the high-level group of artificial intelligence that is also looking at the ethical aspects of the use of data. And by the way, healthcare is one of these sectors where the principles that have been devised within that group would actually be checked. Now, she mentioned the importance of data, and why I invite Edwin. When we did, let's say, the analysis of let's say, that preceded the publications of the communication on digital transformation of health and care, there was a survey on the European citizens on whether they were ready to engage and share data. So 80% of the people were positive on that. But they also told us we are very keen in having this under our control and in a secure way. So Lubna uses data. So how do we, Edwin, can attract, can work on the privacy elements of that? Could you explain?
Yes, thank you, Marcella. Marcella had indicated the fact that I would speak of various projects. In fact, I will speak of just one, which is the amount of wisdom we've acquired from former ones. Because we had some difficulties in running various successful projects, but always hitting the problem of how to really share data. And I will speak about this. First, just a few words on My Health, My Data, which is the current project I'm running as coordinator, which will end by the end of the year. There are some architectural features in it, which are quite simple. There is a metadata catalog in order to allow everybody to look and browse, inspect what type of data there are there. without touching them, but having an understanding of what types of data are included in the system. There is a blockchain system for accessing the data and for tracking what happens to the data when they are passed to somebody else. And there is the possibility of making use of smart contracts for automating the check of the consent and all the elements of the transaction. So this is the basic architecture. We were fascinated by this possibility of having distributed ledger technologies applied to healthcare. We thought that it would be interesting. Of course, all the data are not on the blockchain because it would make it extremely slow. The data are off-chain but accessed through the blockchain. I don't go into further details in this. I go into the problems which I want to consider with you. So how easy and risky is it to publish health data? Because our system is made so that the data can be published. If they are consented, when they are pseudonymous, even without consent when they are anonymous, there can be a tool for anonymizing or pseudonymizing them within our system, which is called amnesia. But the point is that when the data is transferred, there is a copy of the data that you don't know.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Bridging, Widening, Sharing, Let's Advance Europe Together session is about to begin in the Archimedes room.
Good. And
Please join us for that session in the Archimedes room. Bridging, Widening, Sharing, Let's Advance Europe Together.
So let's talk about sharing now for the moment.
thank you for sharing this information.
So the point is that when there is a copy of the data somewhere, then what happens to these data afterwards is not controlled. Even if you use the blockchain to track the passages, so long it is all done there, but once you have given you must trust the recipient, and the recipient must be in control of those data very, very firmly. So another possibility, instead of publishing data, is to have publishing of synthetic data. So what are synthetic data? They are fully artificial data, which can be automatically generated by making use of machine learning algorithms based on recursive conditional parameter aggregation and operating within global statistical models. They retain significant information usefulness, more than normal anonymous data, much more. They do not allow any personal re-identification of original individual data sets under certain conditions. They do not fall within the scope of the GDPR for this reason, because they typify the case of personal data which are rendered anonymous in such a manner that the data subject is not or no longer identifiable. That's recital 26 of the GDPR. And they are therefore also freely tradable, so they have a lot of advantages. If you combine the generation of synthetic data with differential privacy, you may have a mathematical foundation of the degree of privacy you are able to guarantee. This is an advantage because up to now, we don't have a mathematical definition of privacy. This is, as far as I know, the only one you can have at the moment. And so you can have very high quality data. You can have also synthetic imaging. We've done it in our project for cardiovascular images. And you can enrich those images with annotations, and you can have scalable quality control systems to allow to generate synthetic data being even more informative and robust than the original ones, because you can clarify and check what is the outcome you get there. So there is a lot of interesting elements in this synthetic data, and I really think this is an important point for the Commission to consider, to incentivize the generation of synthetic data to allow something which is otherwise an inconvenient truth. Big data is extremely interesting, Big data is crucial for having artificial intelligence, but it's very difficult to achieve because we normally have data in silos, data not moving from one silos to the other. If you want to have this, you have to have shareability, and this is a powerful way for having shareability. The other approach we have been following in our system, in our platform, is bringing the algorithms to the data. This is a direction which has been indicated a couple of years ago by the guidance on sharing private sector data in the European data economy in a working document by the European Commission. It is endorsed by a number of studies right now. And the concept we've followed is that any access is controlled by the blockchain system. Algorithm execution is performed at the location of the data. Original data never leave the repository, and the needed computation only return safe answers. So we have three ways of doing this. We have secure computation. I won't go into the details. I think you are somewhat familiar with this. There is multi-party secure computation is one way of achieving this, so that you fragment the elements of the data to each different party, and none has got them all, so there can be no leakage, and it only returns a result, a computation result, when everything is put together. That's called secure multi-party computation. There is homomorphic encryption, where you can really compute data which are encrypted without decrypting them. This allows you to have a special way of, it is cumbersome and difficult on the mathematical level. We've had one partner who is focused on this and has developed a system based on one scheme. It's a Moore system, and they have done some further security with obfuscation tools on this. It is quite interesting. It's now being discussed. It is one of the elements in the EU Innovation Radar being discussed right now. And there is also homomorphic encryption with deep learning, and this is one further element in this. And the last point is a distributing deep learning mechanism with an untrusted black box. This has got many advantages, especially if you want to scale. You can see a number of things, and distributing the learning process, you can have a way by having training artificial machine learning systems, and to develop knowledge by this. And this is one tool which has been developed and initially patented by Siemens within our project. So to wrap up, privacy by design is a fundamental characteristic of My Health, My Data. Together with process automation and transaction cost minimization thanks to the blockchain and the smart contracts. Researchers can see what types of data are on offer in MHD without needing to access the data. Personal data can be rendered anonymous as synthetic data. Secure computation, which permits running artificial intelligence without disclosing neither data nor algorithms, is performed either through secure multi-party computation or homomorphic encryption, or distributed deep learning with an untrusted black box. And overall, My Health, My Data, privacy by design, and GDPR compliance assessment is currently being finalized and will be ready by the end of October. I think this is significant. It will be possibly the very first European project which is analyzed and assessed from a legal point of view in compliance to GDPR. Thank you.
Thank you, Edwin. You mentioned the role of these privacy-enhancing technologies in accessing data, large-scale data. You also mentioned about the silos, and so data that is, let's say, stored in different repositories. Actually, this links very well with what Claire is going to tell us. Claire, can I ask you to tell us more on the network for oncology data, and how did you put that into practice, or how this solution is actually helping us in verifying how anti-cancer medicine are actually used in clinical practice? Claire.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. So what I want to share with you today is that the approach that IQVIA has been putting together to provide insights in clinical practice in oncology. So for those who don't know, briefly, IQVIA is born from the merge of Quintiles, CRO company, expert in clinical trials, and IMS Health, expert in consulting, technology, and real-world evidence data. So basically what IQVIA is doing is helping people working in healthcare to connect. So these people could be healthcare providers, payers, life science companies, health authorities, and of course patients. So all these stakeholders who want to improve healthcare are actually in contact with IQVIA at some point. So what happened is just while speaking with all these stakeholders, it became very apparent that these stakeholders were facing common challenges. So, for example, the first challenging in oncology that the stakeholders were facing was improving the quality of care in healthcare. One of the second challenges that all these stakeholders were facing is how to accelerate clinical research and how to make sure that patients can benefit from it. Then, of course, how can patients access all the new drug? And also, how can we make sure that this is happening while ensuring financial sustainability? So this is how IQVIA has been putting a program called Oncology Data Network with all these stakeholders involved. And all the stakeholders involved in this project are actually known as Collaboration for Oncology Data in Europe. So what is the Oncology Data Network? So basically, the Oncology Data Network is a platform that is actually allowing to gather data from hospitals in real time to be able to understand the treatment of the patients in the clinical context. So this is really one of the first programs that is actually allowing to understand what happened in clinical practice the day before and to be able to make analysis from these data of high quality pretty much in real time. So obviously it's taking a lot of technology to reach this and to do this program. Obviously, our approach has been to just take privacy to the highest standards. We've been working very closely with all the regulation to be able, and the regulatory body. I would take as an example CNIL for France, which is an example of a strong data privacy body really providing authorizations to be able to provide and put together all this platform. And why we are doing all this work and gathering all data, this is actually allowing first the members of the network, so the hospitals, to access their own data and to be able to have access to a lot of analytics, real time, but also to all the community in oncology to understand actually what's happening and to do research, clinical research and very practical research on what's happening for the treatment of the patients. So where are we at? So we have been starting this program in practice in 2017, so 2 years ago. 70 countries are involved in that program, and it's now more than 119 centers that have joined the network. I think that what's very important is that it's been requiring a lot of partnerships to get there. The technology is allowing us to access data and information close to real time. And actually a governance has been put together, allowing to ensure that the analyses that are done are meeting public interest criteria and are always meeting all the privacy regulations in place in Europe. So not to say that GDPR has been strong points that we had to take into account, and that has been really also very important for the hospital to take into account and to put in their clinical practice. And we're having a huge role by working with the hospitals just to make sure that the GDPR is also well known. So all this program will actually allow us to really provide to the stakeholders and the hospitals that are a member of the network, to provide them all the benefits that we've been speaking about to start with, and also ultimately to the patients to be able to have best treatment and treatments that are continuously improved, because clinicians will be given the data and the evidence that they need to progressively improve the way they treat the patients. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Claire, for taking us through the numbers of these initiatives and the objectives. Now, the most of this data, it is in the clinical aspect. So this can actually get us to Nick, who can tell us the view of the Ministry of Health in Germany. How do you see, let's say, the role of health data for prevention till cure?
Thank you very much. Yes, I have this rather interesting slide up there from GDPR to HDPS. So how do we come from the General Data Protection Regulation, which has been developed now, well, mainly like 2 years ago it came on the market, but it has been developed for quite a long time. And how do we come from the GDPR to the European health data space, which has been presented by the Commission presidency letter to the new Commissioner for Health last week. My presentation today will deal with 3 issues: what happened so far, where we're coming from, which roadblocks did we encounter in Germany, what solutions do we suggest mainly on a European level. Germany actually is a fairly large integrated healthcare market, but we actually have one major problem. We only have very limited access to healthcare data. Although we have beautiful numbers, we have a well-running system, our access to healthcare data is very limited. We tried to use the GDPR as a very crucial moment in time, because everybody was careful, didn't know what's going to change, to start implementing minor changes in national law. We adapted the National Data Protection Law in 2018. We adapted the Social Code. We adapted 154 laws in general last year, 14 out of those only in the field of health and healthcare. And this was just the technical part. This was just a technical implementation of the GDPR into German federal law. We still need to adapt the state law, which is going in parallel. What we are now doing, and that's the next step, that's why I call stage 2, is actually the adaptation of our legal system to the spirit of the GDPR. Because the GDPR brought a mindset change to us because it introduces a risk-based approach. So what we now have is a Digital Care Act, which currently is in Parliament, with which we are actually including even more provisions to facilitate researcher access to patient data. It looks strange, but we finally have electronic consent to data processing. Before, we always needed written consent. We have easier access to social data, which is very important in the area of scientific research purposes. So actually, whatever reimbursement data we have out there, we can now provide them to researchers to get evaluated. Which roadblocks did we identify? Well, we realized that even within Germany, we don't really have a free flow of health data. And we also don't have a real free flow of health data on the European level, because we all have the derogations in the GDPR and the problem of transferring data or getting access to data across the country. We lack mainly a consensus on the scope of national derogations, a consensus on the use of anonymized data and pseudonymized data, the legal base for data collection for scientific research purposes, either consent or having it written in law, different provisions regarding the rights of data subjects. In general, I would say the GDPR regime, if we look at the whole legal data set and legal text out there, is far too complex for researchers. We need to break that down into, I would say, the sound bites necessary for the researchers That's why we came up with the idea of having a strategic approach to the so-called European health data space. Our main goal actually is to provide health and well-being. I myself am a physician by training, I'm not a lawyer. I had the honor to lead the GDPR working group at the Federal Ministry of Health and work with lawyers to develop new law. And I think this should be now, we should use this special moment we have right now to really get the European health data space running. And we have now a mandate, and we should use the next 5 years to do that. Which principles can we follow? We need to have a trustworthy AI. That's actually what makes a difference on a European level compared to China and the US. Use an AI which is trustworthy. Provide real free flow of data in this continent, and use the principle of competitiveness. We need to be competitive on global scale. How can we reach this? What is the basis? What do we do in practical terms? We need to have a good regulatory framework for AI. I think that's going to be necessary to also be kind of a GDPR on the AI sector, having really a European standard which could then be used by other markets. We need to have, and I think we saw many examples here today, solid and good health data infrastructures. Not one infrastructure, we need several. We have them. We have Elixir with BBMMI, we have the EHDSI, we have the European reference networks. We need to use such kind of a federated infrastructure where we can actually access data, exchange data, bring the algorithms to the data. I think that we still need to be creative. I think I'm not kind of being a bit visionary here, but we need to discuss this and have something in place rather soon. And one practical solution to work first is actually to have a code of conduct on the health data use. I think a code of conduct is very valuable. Why a code of conduct? It breaks down the data protection rules for specific controllers and processors. And that's what we need in health, that we need for the health researchers. It respects the EU competence order, something that is very important to, well, people like me, the member states, which always say, well, it's national law, we need to, especially in healthcare, yes, it respects the competence order. And it is foreseen in the GDPR. It's an instrument of the GDPR. So that's why my call today is, let's work together on a code of conduct. My key messages and take-home message to you, Germany is on the move. We are going to be working on these issues for the next German presidency, the second half of next year. We need to have a common understanding, and let's start joining forces for a true European health data space. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. So actually, you introduced very well what Ivo is going to probably touch upon. I hope so. So, and that is about the flow of data in repositories that are heterogeneous, that do respect privacy, that do respect the GDPR, and they enable research and public health approaches, new approaches. Ivo.
Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is not an EU project. I'm going to talk about a member state initiative. This is something slightly different, and Marco generously supported us. He told me to say this, and otherwise he would have not invited me to come here at all. And he said that I should say that DG Connect supports this heavily.
No. That's a jointly, no. This is...
Okay. 1+ million genomes, member state initiative. Essentially, this started out about 18 months ago, where 13 EU member states signed an agreement that said they would share genome data together with phenotypic data, together with clinical data across Europe, essentially. And this extended in the meantime by 7 more EU member states signing up to this, plus Norway, which is not EU, signed this up as well. So at the moment there's 21 signatories that have said they will do this. There are 7 observer states, Belgium, Switzerland, Germany, Denmark, France, Ireland and Poland, who are thinking about coming into this as well. What are the objectives? So the objective is to build a federated framework that would allow secure and authorized cross-border access to genomic and other health data across the EU, supporting research, healthcare and prevention. And this is to allow users to search and access the data through user-friendly and effective data governance structures and build on existing national and European initiatives. and then obviously to ensure that citizens, researchers, healthcare systems in Europe can best benefit from the full potential of genomics to advance targeted healthcare interventions, leading to better prevention, early diagnosis and treatment of disease. That's the picture that we're going at. So, what does this look like? Obviously, in the center of all of this stands the patient. Patient with genomic information. Now, you have to build around this an ethical, legal, societal, secure system so that you can do this. Genome data is identifiable. So you can identify an individual by his genome. And then, obviously, around that, you need to build other things. You need to build standards, how you do your sequencing. You have to build quality guidelines, how you do that. You have to make the data interoperable. And you have to say how you are actually going to describe the phenotypic information, the electronic healthcare record information. You have to do it in all of the languages that will come onto the table in this. We've built this into, if it comes up, into a bunch of working groups. Has not happened yet. Hopefully it will. There they are. Okay, into working groups that have split different of these elements and are working out of these. Yes, a very important point. We are doing this on the level of the entire member state initiative, but what the idea is that each member state that has signed up has a mirror group, so a working group that is doing that specifically for each nation. So they say, our legal, ethical, societal issues are these, and bring those up to the table on the level of the member state initiative. So there is a mirror group in each country that has signed up for each one of the 10 working groups. It ties in with a lot of international initiatives. Some of these are these European Canadian projects. Some of them are large international projects, International Rare Disease Research Consortium, and so on. Okay, so there are the 10 working groups, 3 use cases that I'll show you what they are. There is a mapping of current and future genomic initiatives and data that is ongoing, and there is an interim governance structure that has been put in place. And we're building a roadmap for that. So like in all of these things, there is a steering group and the working groups sitting underneath this, with the national mirror groups doing exactly the same thing on the level of each of the countries that have signed up. So, what are the working groups? The working groups are obviously the scope, stakeholders and governance, the ethical, legal, societal issues, LC, common standards
Ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased to
information.
announce that the Horizon Prize for Social Innovation will be awarded in room Archimedes at 6:30 p.m.
Good.
We warmly invite you to attend the ceremony.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then there is a working group on good sequencing practice, good genomic practice, we call this. I chair that group. There is a working group on federating systems. So how do you actually have the information sitting in each one of the countries in sort of a similar fashion so that you can start interrogating across the entire system. So the idea is not to centralize all of the data in one place. The idea is everyone has his own data, but you make it so that you can ask a question onto the entire system and pull that back into your computer and then use that information. Then there is everything that goes around healthcare economics out of this. There is the involvement of private sector. That one is extended. There are patient advocacy groups that are involved in there. And then the 3 use cases that work across places where you can really do well with genomic data, which is obviously rare disease, cancer, and then in prevention into common diseases. Okay, so this is sort of what it should look like in the context of cancer. Obviously, that is one use case. In the context of a rare disease, different use case. And then in the context of common diseases, more preventative. How can you actually tell someone how he should behave in order to stay as healthy as possible? So that's sort of the picture to the whole thing. And then if we manage to get that up and running, then obviously in the future you can start thinking about projects like this that is also supported by DG Connect, which is Lifetime, a CSA that is working on sort of then going in and understanding each one of the individual diseases by keying the disease up all the way down to individual cells. So, okay, and with that I'll leave it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ivo. Thank you. I think we covered from, let's say, a number of experiences, from specific projects to the use of data, challenges in governance, establishing large networks, and making sure that this data flows across member states and is used from prevention to diagnosis to care. I'd like to open the floor for observations on the role of data for health or questions. And I do have the first gentleman there. Please introduce yourself before you put forward the question. There.
Hello. Hello? Yeah, you can hear? Okay, thank you. My name's Alistair Leyland. I'm representing the European Public Health Association. Very interesting session about data for health, but what we've heard about is health data. It's 11 years since the Commission for the Social Determinants of Health reported to the WHO, which emphasized the importance of social factors in determining just about every health outcome. The data we need on social determinants don't come from the health sector, so we need to work cross-sectors to get, cross-sectorally, to get additional data on income, on education, on all these factors involved. And it's just a bit disappointing not to hear any of that in these presentations. But I did enjoy it, so thank you.
Can I take that?
But you made a point. The lady? I'd like to collect 2 or 3 questions, and then we have a round of comments. I think, is he here?
Hello, Annemarie Vassenau from the Netherlands, a University Medical Center. What do you advise a big university medical center to be a global leader in data and science? What is necessary? What is sufficient?
Good. Any other questions here? Observation?
I think it was a very impressive panel indeed. Thank you so much. I just have one very challenging question. We had the private sector, we had projects, we had governments. There is any table where all these things can go together? So our German government wants to set out the legal bits as algorithms we can tap on or companies you can involve, because what I see again is wonderful, but I see a lot of fragmentation and not really a table where all the efforts can be converging to create a model for Europe or a model for Germany to be then repeated in other member states. It's not necessarily as of the beginning Europe. I was European when I was 16, so about 50 years ago, and at the time there were just few member states who were thinking about Europe. In my class there were 2 of us, myself and I don't remember the name. He was the previous president of the European Parliament. Now, where is the table? Where is the table where these efforts can be converging and integrated, so we don't repeat another 5 years project funding? Because again, we didn't speak about money. Where the money comes from? That's a very interesting question, but this is the second part. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. So we have, if you don't mind, let's do a through, and then we will come back to you, and we start with you. So we have three interesting observations now on the table, and I will back to you. So first one, I want to get the views there. First one on the heterogeneity of data that is needed to progress, and let's say not just focusing on clinical slash research data. One other point, how do we take all this beautiful idea and to make us a global competitors? And what is the forum that puts all these things together beside this event? Who wants to start? Lubna.
Yeah, thank you. I want to address the point about the social data and maybe shortly the other points. So integrating many data sources, also the ones that are not classically available in healthcare. As we know, the data that we have classically available is basically workflow data or reimbursement data. We didn't collect data to train AI systems. We are using data that's been collected for transactional purposes. So around social data, for example, at Okra, we are using proxies. We use open data available to proxy proxy, for example, just an example on R&D, using Google Images to basically score socially the different streets. If you see a BMW parked in a street compared to another street, so you can have some social scores that you can use indirectly to enhance an AI system in production. That's the stream we're going. We're not waiting for government to collect data as a startup in AI. We are doing the job ourselves, because if we wait for governments to do it, we're going to be there very, very late. Addressing into the second point about fragmentation of data and a model for Europe, it is, yes, we do need to create a model, but it's not enough, unfortunately. We need to work together to create something by testing it and addressing the scale, I think. If we don't address that scale, something that we can scale across all the member states, even if it is not addressing the most innovative type of projects, but something small, some data that we can use across all member states and prove value, even if it is a baby step, even if it's not a groundbreaking research, I think that's what we need to be doing and collaborating across.
Edwin?
Yeah, well, social data, of course, extremely important. I just would like to remind that Nick Schneider had mentioned them, so we have at least one government which is sensitive to the issue, and this is encouraging. So more needs to be done. For the fact that there are interesting ideas and we need to bring them together into an initiative, I think this is very true. And I think there's a great role of the European Commission to bring all of these things together in general and to promote research, innovation in specific aspects of this. But probably we need something more than what we have until now. I was encouraged by the declaration by Nick Schneider again about what is the program of the German government for the second half of the year in its presidency, because we need to go beyond something which is a bit too technical and exclusive, like the Article 29 on GDPR, and get really the actors, those who are striving to apply this complex and very interesting regulation into something lively and dynamic and competitive for Europe. And perhaps some initiative in this sense would be very good.
Nick, do you want to pick it up? And then I have to...
I think that microphone also works, does it?
Yeah.
Yeah, fine. Yeah, thank you very much, Edwin. I think, and that's again, the idea of having a code of conduct is exactly what you were meaning, bringing together those which are data controllers, those which are dealing with the data. The code of conduct is not written by governments. The code of conduct is written by those people which are working with the data. And it's breaking the legal boundaries which are there, the complexity down to a specific group, a specific community, that they understand what they have to do and how they can do it in a safe way. And what I like about the concept of a code of conduct, and don't get me wrong, we're not going to get it finalized under the German presidency. I think the German presidency is most probably going to be the starting point for this process. But we have to get the political momentum there to bring those actors together and give them the forum to really work on their own guidelines on how to deal with health data. Because in the end, at the moment, many don't really understand the concepts which are out there. And we have different understanding. Country A goes that way, country B goes that way. We are all in a so-called European health data space, but it's a fragmented space, and we have to bring everyone together. And I think that's the role we have, and with the code of conduct, because it is an instrument in the GDPR, comes into place. Funding will be an issue. I think we are already thinking about how to fund such an endeavor, but I think that's something which goes, I'm thinking of a 5-year plan. 2025, we should have the code of conduct out there, and it should be doable and usable for everyone.
Thank you. I think that the evolution of this concept of the European health data space will certainly be a concept which would include this heterogeneous and also diverse source, which will then support, let's say, the continuum from research to deployment in the member states. So at the end, eventually, these discussions, putting together the people that will have to let's say, supports that will certainly progress in that sense. I have 3 observations. So 3 words, 1 and then 2. You have the. So we start from the lady here, please.
Thank you. I'm looking forward for the German presidency to start this code of conduct, because one of the things that we are struggling with as well is not only the behavior and code of conduct for the users of the data, but it's actually the data is coming from individuals, and the role of individuals is hardly taken into account in reality. Although we have the GDPR protecting the individual, reality is quite different, and I think that should be a point that is part of this whole discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Francesco Florindi. I work for BBMRI ERIC, one of the research infrastructures that was mentioned before, participating to the Canada calls, as we call them. Thanks to the panelists, and thank you particularly to Nick Schneider. I appreciate very much your approach to the code. As you know, BBMRI was trying to coordinate an attempt to start a code of conduct for health research. We worked a lot with more than 90 partners on this endeavor, but what was missing was really the political backing, the strength in numbers, the guns behind us to really go ahead and have a document that could come from the data, those who are dealing with data every day, but supported by those who have to implement the law. So I'm extremely happy, on behalf of BBMRI, we're really, really happy to see this commitment, looking forward to this, to work in this way. But then I have a question for the panel. We've seen BBMRI, Elixir, Eatris, Ekran mentioned several times. What can be the role in the next, if their objective is 2025, what's the role of research infrastructures? How can we really become the honest broker in this conversation? Can we be the partner in between policymakers and the patients in developing a real European health data space? Yes or no? Of course, I think yes, but I would love to know the opinion of the speakers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other? The third observation? No? But then I will go back to the panel, and elaborate more than a yes answer to this. And especially, there is one element which we didn't touch in our answer, which was important. So can you also link, this with the importance of making sure that whatever infrastructure solutions to health data can actually lead to the effects on global leadership for
Ladies and gentlemen, a reminder that the Horizon Prize for Social Innovation will be awarded in room Archimedes at 6:30. You are very welcome to join us and attend this ceremony. The Horizon Prize for Social Innovation, room Archimedes at 6:30 p.m.
And we will all go there.
So if I can make one comment, I obviously like what Germany is getting up to here, and I hope that Germany starts coming into the 1+ million genomes project, because we need people like that who are going to help the whole group, because that is exactly one of the points, that if you can the 1+ million genomes member state initiative is signed by the ministries of health. It's in most countries. So it is very, very high up that this was signed. And obviously, if we can get them all around one table to agree on how to behave, then that really moves things. So that really opens up doors, and I think that's extremely important.
And what I insist, if we don't go away, if we don't get an answer to the questions, how do we make universities lead?
So what was the question was how a university can become a leader in data science, isn't it? Let me try. It's a complicated question. So first of all, because data science is quite a large discipline, has different elements in it, from data management to the mathematical method to do statistical method to do machine learning, and then the applications to impact clinical practice. So I would say the first thing to have is to have the actual people who have expertise. And this takes time. This is more or less a new discipline. I'm sure you have expertise in your university that cover all these different disciplines, but you need a strategy to have all these people work together. And that's why a lot of universities now are creating degrees in data science. And I think this is helpful because it helps to structure the field in a given university to take all this discipline from mathematics to statistics to machine learning and make them work together. So that would be the first thing. The second thing that would be to create research infrastructure that work in this domain. Something that helps a lot is European projects, to participate in them. I don't know whether it is possible to become the leader, but definitely to become a key player by participating to this initiative. And then finally, to link with the previous question, I think working with this data infrastructure helps a lot because they are really the experts, and they help a lot structure a discipline like data science in university to know what are the next steps, what are the areas where a university needs to invest in terms of human resources, research, etc. That would be my answer. It's a bit complex, but it's a complex question.
I can add to that from industry perspective, the view, especially if you have as a goal to produce talent for industry, not only for research. I think there's good to think about the alignment between the two. And I'll give an example coming from academia. For example, there's some software that's designed for universities. They give it for free. But then for industry, you have to pay very expensive licenses, and we don't do that. So we use open software. So building that handicap for the students to be using the other licensed software. So I think very simple measures to train people to be ready to go to industry. So that's just from practicalities, but also the point you mentioned around the verticals. So being maybe as a group, research group, focused on specific verticals around healthcare, either the genomic side, either the efficiency side, efficacy side, building that expertise, then they will give them a very good kind of background that's moved to industry and provide something new that we can move on and build great products in Europe.
Thank you. Any final remark before we all go to the prize?
Final remark. Yeah, just to echo the last question, I think that indeed, I think that every organization involved, like in clinical trials, but also in just using the real-world data to be able to be and to start a continuous improvement strategy is working obviously in the right direction. So my experience, I see that every project around real-world data and analysis your own practice and just like taking advantage of this to improve it is good. And also to the questions I was asked, I think that as far as the projects I'm speaking about today, it's interestingly the European Society of Medical Oncology wanted to do a project like mine, like the Oncology Data Network, and was not able to do it because of funding, obviously. And then the private sector is kind of able to put that together, but now is facing the issue to have everyone working together to make that happen, to have the endorsement of many European groups. So it's true that having this level and going to the next stage and having everyone recognize the importance of the data and just sit together around the table to be able to define a strategy and just like what is good as a next step and how we can work together on this kind of projects to make that work for ultimately better healthcare and better access for patients to drugs. I mean, that's what's the question that we're going to have to solve in the upcoming months now and years.
Just a couple of words. Somebody mentioned the individuals as data providers. I forgot to say that My Health, My Data is a project bringing together data from clinical institutions on one hand, and also data from individuals on the other hand. Have a look at our website, myhealthmydata.eu, and you will learn more about this. Thank you.
So, I think that on behalf of DG Research, our colleagues Pilar, well, Joanna is not here, but DG Zante is in the spirit with us, Carmen, we want to thank you very much. Oh, yeah. Joanna, thank you very much for your insight. I think that we can say that most of these aspects, from governance, Joanna, to the elements of research, will be taken up also in the further discussions for the research program. So thank you very much, and please join me in the last round of applause for our speakers. Thank you.